My name is Sarah Reef, and I am the chair of CLA's Health and Wellness Committee. We are very lucky today to have a great presentation. My co-chair, Gary Letourneau, is going to introduce our speaker. I will let you know that she is appearing using her iPad, so she's on, but we might not be able to see her during screen sharing, but she is there. All right, Gary, take it away.
Hi, hey, thanks, Sarah. Welcome, everybody. In my opinion, this subject is the single most important topic we cover on the Health and Wellness Committee for the California Lawyers Association. Why do I say that? Because it is our number one killer by far. It affects substantially everybody in one way or another in this country. And the costs to treat the symptoms of this disease are just incredibly expensive. And we've known for many, probably 40, 50 years, that this disease is preventable. In fact, Caldwell Esselstyn at the Cleveland Clinic says it's not only reversible, it's not only preventable, but it's easily reversible with nutrition. And we're really, really fortunate today to have Jennifer Namath with us, who's a clinical nurse at the University of California in San Diego in the cardiac rehab and wellness program. And I had the honor and pleasure of meeting Jennifer 5-6 years ago when she and Dr. Barnard from the Barnard Medical Center were teaching a class on this subject. And I was just blown away by her knowledge and understanding of this subject and understanding of nutritional science. So it's a great privilege and honor to have her here today. And thank you, Jennifer, and welcome.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me here today. And thank you, Gary and Sarah and Brianna for organizing this. I'm sorry you guys can't see me. I told them earlier I could have just worn my pajamas and you guys wouldn't even notice, but I'm on an iPad today, so you probably can't see my picture here. But feel free, this is interactive. If anyone has any questions, you can either hold them towards the end, or if you want to stop me and ask any questions, feel free to do so, and I'd be happy to answer those. So we are talking about America's number one killer. I will talk a little bit more about myself. I am a cardiac nurse. So I'm super passionate about heart disease and how preventable it is. We're going to talk about heart disease, but some other things as well. This is just a reminder, make sure you consult with your doctor if you're making any major dietary changes. It's a good thing for your health to do those things, to switch more towards what I'm talking about today. But just be aware that if you're on any medication, sometimes those need to be adjusted because you can be over medicated once you start eating healthier, which is a good thing, but you got to coordinate with your doctor to speak about those things. So a little bit about me. Here you can see some pictures. I'm a registered nurse. I've been working in the field of cardiology for about 11 years now here in San Diego. I used to work for Sharp Healthcare, and I was taking care of post-op open heart surgery patients. And then now I'm in something I'm super passionate about in cardiac rehab. So we work with patients that have either had a heart attack, a stent, valve replacement or repair, heart transplant patients, and helping them. Basically, we're a monitored exercise program. So we monitor them during exercise. And we have a program called the Pritikin program, which is a lifestyle program and teaching them how to eat more plant-based. I'm also, as Gary had mentioned, I'm a certified PCRM, which stands for Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, certified Food for Life instructor. I'm not currently doing that right now. I would like to get back into it, but I would do live cooking demonstrations and education on plant-based diet. I also have a degree in dietetics, which really is just a fancy word for nutrition. I have two amazing little boys, Ethan and Evan, and Ethan is 2.5 and Evan is 8 months old. So I'm definitely busy there. Ethan and I started a little YouTube show. If you're interested, if you go to eatingfore.com, you'll see our YouTube channel will come up, and I have a lot of good cooking videos, and I'll actually show you a short one today so you kind of get a feel for that as well. I also have an amazing husband. I have to mention him. He's awesome. And what really started me in this journey is when my husband was 28 years old, this was pre-kids, he had a kind of a health scare already. He had precursors to colorectal cancer in his late 20s, which is pretty rare. Usually we don't see that come around in patients and things like that until 40s, 50s, 60s. So it started, that kind of started our thought process. We thought we quote unquote were eating pretty healthy. But what was going on here? So that's really what made me kind of dive more into nutrition. And something that was really influential for me was a book called Eat to Live. It's by Dr. Joel Fuhrman. I read that book and also watched a documentary called Forks Over Knives, and it really changed my way of thinking and how we could better eat to take care of our bodies long term. So I'm going to reference the Eat to Live book here quite often throughout my PowerPoint. So what you'll learn today is we're going to talk about genetics, obesity, heart disease, and diabetes. We're going to recognize which food choices are best, what to eat, which is of course important. We all like to eat. How to manage restaurants and events with friends, and then strategies for success. So most of you probably are aware, and every time I go to Costco or the grocery store, I'm pretty aware of what people are buying and putting in their shopping carts, and it's pretty alarming. Unfortunately, sometimes I'm thinking, how do people even live that long when they're buying all this processed foods? And this is just an estimate, but in the American diet, about 51% is refined or processed foods. Another 42%, a large piece of the pie there, is dairy and animal products. In fact, the average American eats about 200 pounds of meat per year, which is a lot. And then the little wedge in the pie there is fruits and vegetables. And then of those fruits and vegetables, about half of the vegetables eaten come from potatoes, and half that comes from fries or chips in the American diet. So it's really, really sad how most Americans are eating these days. So a lot of people blame it on genetics. A lot of my patients too are like, well, I was dealt a bad hand with my genetics, and it's just meant to be that I'm supposed to have heart disease. But that's simply not true. Our genes do not determine disease on their own. It's actually exciting. We have more control than a lot of people think. Our genes are almost like light switches. We can actually flip them on and off based on our lifestyle and how we're eating. So that's good news, right? Because we can control more than we previously thought we did. Most of the chronic diseases, like 80% of chronic disease is from lifestyle, and 20% or less comes from genetic difficulties or problems. So this comes from Dr. Oz, but I always like this quote that he said, genetics load the gun, but your lifestyle pulls the trigger. So we do have a lot of control, which is good. So let's talk about obesity. We often use to define if someone's overweight or obese, we use something called the body mass index scale. So you can kind of look on there, you can find your height and your weight and kind of see where your body mass index falls. Ideally, you want to be in that green zone there. So that's 18.5 to 24.9 is your normal quote unquote weight. Overweight is considered a BMI of 25 to 29.9, and then obesity is classified as 30 to 34.9. Unfortunately, with Americans, we even had to come up with severely obese and morbidly obese on the scale too, because some people fall into that criteria. So this is pretty alarming. This came from the 2020 Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee. It's really sad because our children are becoming overweight and obese. In fact, children ages 2 to 19, 41%. I couldn't believe that when I read that 41% of our children in that age category are considered overweight or obese. And unfortunately for adults, it's even worse. It's 71.2% of adults in our country are overweight or obese. I found this really interesting. I heard this from Dr. Dean Ornish. He quoted a study that was done at Harvard that had over 12,000 people, and they found that if one or more of your friends are obese, your risk of becoming obese is 45% higher. So who we surround ourselves to, it makes a big influence on our weight as well. I thought that was pretty interesting. So there's many complications of obesity. You can get type 2 diabetes, heart disease, definitely cancer, because fat is a metabolic thing. When you have extra fat on your body, it tends to fuel extra hormone production, and that can especially increase our risk of especially the cancers that deal more with hormones. So that's like your breast cancer, your prostate cancer, ovarian cancer. High blood pressure or hypertension is another side effect of obesity, stroke, sleep apnea. That's when people unfortunately stop breathing when they sleep, and they can go into cardiac arrest from that. So if you know someone that snores, especially at night, make sure they get tested for sleep apnea, because snoring can be a sign that they're not getting enough oxygen intake at night. Joint pain, of course, just from carrying around that extra weight, and decreased mobility. So a little bit about diabetes. So what happens with diabetes is the pancreas becomes overwhelmed with excessive demand for insulin. And this comes especially from our refined or our processed foods. So kids ages 12 to 19, 23.1, a little 23% about is considered pre-diabetic or diabetic. And then among 34.2 million Americans either are diabetic, and then 88 million have pre-diabetes. And the crazy thing about that is a lot of people don't know they have pre-diabetes and that they're heading down the road towards diabetes. It's pretty common. So there's two types of diabetes. Type 1 is typically genetic and it starts in childhood. Not always. Sometimes people find out a little bit later, but typically that type of patient will find out when they're a child that they have type 1. And the pancreas actually stops producing insulin. So they are insulin dependent and have to take injections of insulin because their body doesn't produce it. Type 2 is far more common. It usually is correlated when people are overweight or obese. And what happens is the pancreas simply just cannot keep up with the body's need for insulin. It keeps pumping out more insulin, and the body actually becomes resistant to it at some point. So if you ever, I'm sure many of you have gotten lab work done for your physicians. They can do several different, they can either do a fasting blood sugar. This tells us on this screen what's normal and what's considered diabetic. They can also do something called the hemoglobin A1C. That tells you your average blood sugar for the last 3 months. And that goes kind of at a different scale. So anything from 4 to 6.5% is considered normal. And above that is considered either pre-diabetic or diabetic. So the USDA estimates that the typical American has about 30 teaspoons of added sugar per day, which is crazy. If you think of those little pouches that you can get, or those little packets of sugar, that has 1 teaspoon of sugar per packet. So if you can imagine, if you get 30 of those packets, that's about on average how much of American in the American diet people are eating that much sugar, which is crazy. So if you know anyone that has diabetes, I highly recommend that you check out, it's called masteringdiabetes.org. They have awesome programs that can actually help reverse diabetes. A lot of doctors don't like to say that, but the nice thing is when you start changing your lifestyle and changing your diet, you can actually, if you have type 2 diabetes, can actually help reverse it, which is great. Heart disease. So like I said, I'm a cardiac nurse. So I'm really passionate about this. Unfortunately, heart disease continues year after year to be the leading cause of death for both men and women in our country. In fact, if you're over the age of 40 and you eat the standard American diet, you have a 95% chance of having hardening of your blood vessels and plaque buildup in those vessels. So it's a very common problem. If you go to actually other countries like in rural Africa and stuff, they hardly know what heart disease is. It just doesn't exist there because they don't eat the standard American diet. They're eating more plant-based, far less animal products. And of course, they're not eating at McDonald's and things like that. So other countries surprisingly don't even know hardly what heart disease is, whereas here in this country, it's the #1 killer of men and women. I just saw this and I just thought it was unfortunately comical, but also very sad. So this is a billboard. 1 in 3 people in Louisiana will die from heart disease. And right next to it is a sign for Burger King. And it's like, unfortunately, a lot of people do not see the correlation between the two. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of people think it's genetic when it's not, it's lifestyle. So coronary artery disease, what is it? So as you can see on the left there, that's a nice, clean, open vessel. That's what we want. Our hearts are essentially a pump, and we want those vessels to be nice and clean so the blood can freely flow through there. On the right side, you can see what happens is through dietary intake of cholesterol. Keep in mind, cholesterol only comes from animal products. That's an easy way to remember it. What happens is that plaque starts to build up, that yellow there, and it starts to slowly occlude the blood flow. So what happens during a heart attack? So what happens is inside the tissue, which is a really fine layer, it's called the endothelial layer. It's very just one cell layer thick. So it's very, very small. A cardiologist once told me, is if you think of like a tissue paper, that's like how even smaller than tissue paper, that's how thin that lining is. And what happens is it starts to get inflamed. And what happens is our body thinks it's doing a protective function and starts building up that plaque layer, that yellow layer. But unfortunately, eventually it starts to occlude the vessel completely, or what happens is blood flow goes through there. And especially if someone has high blood pressure and there's a lot of force going through that vessel, it can actually break off the cap of that on top of that yellow layer there on that cholesterol plaque. And then our body thinks it's helping and it forms a clot there and it completely occludes the vessel. And then unfortunately, part of the muscle of the heart can die. And of course, this is an emergency. If this happens, someone needs to, of course, go to the hospital and potentially have a stent placed. And I'll talk about more about what kind of interventions they do. So I always like to go over the warning signs of a heart attack. Typically it's going to come, now this is for men and women present differently. Typically men will have more like an uncomfortable pressure, squeezing or pain in the center of the chest that just doesn't go away. They can get sweating, vomiting, shortness of breath. Sometimes people say it feels like an elephant is sitting on my chest, an extreme amount of pressure. They can get palpitations where it feels like their heart rate is fluttering. But women can be a little bit different. They can have just general fatigue, and which is crazy because most women, especially busy moms out there and women, it's like, how can you differentiate that between just being normal, busy life, being tired? They can have pain that spreads to their jaw, neck, or shoulder, indigestion or gas-like pain, or discomfort between their shoulder blades. So it can present a little bit differently for women. So unfortunately in the US, every 40 seconds that goes by, someone has a heart attack. So it's really, really common. So typical interventions with heart disease is, again, that yellow there that you see, that's the plaque or the cholesterol layer that has formed. What they do is they when a patient has an angioplasty or stent, they stick a vessel or they stick a catheter through either through the groin, or now commonly they're doing it through the wrist. They stick a catheter in there to the heart, and they can inflate a balloon, so it kind of squishes that plaque on the side of the vessel, so it opens up that vessel again. Or they can put a stent in there, and you see that on the bottom, which actually it pushes the plaque also and keeps the vessel open. But a lot of people think this is a cure-all, but you can clog up those vessels again, even though you have these interventions done. Bypass surgery. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. Coronary artery bypass grafting. It started in the 1950s at the Cleveland Clinic. My husband always brings up, it's like, who was the first patient they did this on? This new procedure. Of course, nowadays in America, this is a very common procedure, but it always makes you think of who did this first. But what they do is they take a vein that was either removed from usually from the leg, and they stitch it on the heart, and it basically bypasses an area that is clogged off in the heart. Now, this is a huge surgery. I mean, they basically saw open a patient's chest. They have to break the ribs to get to the heart. And a lot of times this is preventable. I mean, we can change our diets and not have to go through this. So, it's a major surgery. So let's switch gears now and talk a little bit about cancer. So in the President Nixon declared a war on cancer with the National Cancer Act of 1971. Since then, it's been estimated that America has spent about $200 billion on cancer research, yet unfortunately, breast cancer rates continue to increase, and also especially prostate cancer as well. So cancer, what is it? So it's caused by abnormal cell growth that completely goes out of control. Interestingly enough, it takes a cancer cell about 6 years to create 1 million abnormal cells, which creates about a 1 millimeter tiny size tumor, and then about 1 billion cells in about 10 years, causing a 1 centimeter tumor. So by the time a woman gets a mammogram and they see some kind of tumor there, cancer already has been brewing for quite some time already. It's taken a while to get to that point. So I get frustrated sometimes with our medical system, because a lot of times when women are diagnosed, with breast cancer or something, they sometimes the medical community, tells them, you got to make a decision really quick about what treatment plan you want to get. But it's like, unfortunately, this cancer has been growing for quite some time, and they probably have some time to make a decision. So I know that was all kind of like downer. So it's a lot of information, but there is good news, which I'm going to kind of switch gears here and talk about the hope that comes from our diet, which we have control, right, of what we stick in our mouth every day. So whole food, plant-based to the rescue. So plant-based, it means eating foods, of course, that come from plants. One of my friends once told me that it's food that has a mother or a face, or not eating food that has a mother or face. And then eating whole foods. We want to concentrate on whole foods. So whole foods not the store, of course, but eating whole foods that don't require a label. They've been not processed. And these foods are awesome for us because they're full of antioxidants and nutrients that help fight disease and lead to longevity. I always like to tell people, Oreos are considered vegan, but we shouldn't be eating Oreos all the time, right? So we want to eat nutrient-dense plant-based foods that is not processed or minimally processed, because that food is basically loses all its beneficial, antioxidants and everything like that, and nutrients. Oil is a good example. Sometimes there's a lot of hype around oil. Basically, for most adults' diets, we don't need oil in our diet because it just adds extra fat and calories that most people don't need. Of course, if you have small kids, it is okay for toddlers and kids because they definitely need a higher fat diet. So for example, I have one of my 2.5-year-olds, if I give him some kind of rice or some vegetables and stuff like that, I tend to saute it in some olive oil or something like that, because they do need a little bit higher fat. But definitely if you're trying to lose weight, a good thing is to get rid of oils, because again, it's just extra calories and extra fat that most people don't need. And especially people that have heart disease or diabetic, oil can actually contribute to plaque buildup and cholesterol, especially the oils that are high in saturated fats. So that's going to be your coconut oil, your palm oil. And I didn't know this too, before I got into these cooking classes through Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, I thought like when you sauteed vegetables and things like that, that you had to use oil, but you can actually just use a little bit of vegetable broth or water, and it actually works really well. You can still saute, you can even bake and just add a little bit of water, veggie broth, and it works just fine. So where do we get our nutrients from? So our macronutrients, those are what provide calories for us. So those are our proteins, our carbohydrates, our fats, and alcohol. Of course, I just added that on there because the next slide I'll show you how calorie dense alcohol is. And then your micronutrients don't add calories to our diet, but they're very important and we need to get them. So there are vitamins, our minerals, our phytonutrients, which have our antioxidants. So our carbohydrates have 4 calories per gram. Our proteins have 4 calories per gram, and our fats have 9 calories per gram. So a lot of times people will be like, carbohydrates make you fat. And if you look at this scale, you're like, no, actually fat makes people fat. It's not, fat has twice as many calories per gram than carbohydrates do. And then alcohol, interestingly enough, has 7 calories per gram of alcohol. So it's pretty calorically dense as well. So carbohydrates are really important in our diet. They're used to make glucose, which glucose provides energy for our body. And our brains actually use glucose to run off of. So we need to provide carbohydrates in our diet. That's why when you hear about people that do Atkins or something that's super low carbohydrates, a lot of times they complain of headache or brain fog. And it's because our brain runs off carbohydrates. So if we're not providing adequate carbohydrates, people feel that brain fog. And of course, we want to favor whole grains or whole carbohydrates over the processed ones. So here's kind of a good guide. Of course, you want to eat the right type of carbohydrates. The ones on the left are the simple carbohydrates. That's like your pure sugar, your white bread, cookies, donuts, things like that. Of course, we want to stay away from those kind of type of carbohydrates. Only have those occasionally for a treat or for a birthday or something like that. But we want to stick the majority of the time with our complex carbohydrates. So those are your like oatmeal, brown rice, fruits, vegetables, because those provide great energy for us. They also have tons of antioxidants and fiber. And what happens when we make this like white Wonder Bread is we strip the outer kernel of the wheat kernel, and it removes minerals, it removes fiber, it removes vitamin E. So as much as possible, again, we want to favor our whole intact grains. So like your brown rice, quinoa, millet, buckwheat, over your processed grains. Even, brown rice, quinoa, things like that, I would favor that even over bread, just because there's more nutrition and it's less processed. The finer the flour is brown, the quicker our blood sugar rises, and that triggers fat storage hormones. So we want to stick again with less processed grains. So a little bit about fiber. Most Americans do not get even close to what we need in fiber every day. So generally we should be eating at least 30, if not more, 30 to 50 grams of fiber at least, minimal. And most Americans are getting like 12 to 15 grams a day. And fiber does so many great things for us. It doesn't get a lot of hype, of course, It doesn't have any calories, which is great. It does amazing things like carries waste out of the body. It actually will bond with with cholesterol in the body and take it out of the body. It bonds with hormones and reduces like breast cancer risk. And an easy way to remember, things that have fiber are going to come from plant-based foods. Comes from the ground, like for your fruits and vegetables. Your beans and lentils have a lot of fiber, your whole unprocessed grains, and animal foods do not have fiber. So that's kind of an easy way to remember that. There's this whole, I'm a complete nerd when it comes to this stuff, being a nurse, but there's a whole fascinating world around the gut microbiome. That's our gut bacteria. And in fact, we have more bacteria in our gut than we actually have human cells. So we're actually walking around and we're not even really human. We're made more out of bacteria than we are human cells, which is crazy to think about. But what we eat influences our immune system. So most of our immune system actually comes from our gut and what we feed our gut and what we put in our stomach. And it's amazing. And actually something else that happens in the gut is it produces like 80% of our serotonin. And serotonin is it's a hormone that makes us feel good. So there is definitely a gut-brain connection that we have to be aware of as well. And most Americans are not getting adequate fiber, and that doesn't make our guts very happy. Especially with COVID now too, we need to eat a lot of the plant-based foods because it helps boost our immune system, which is great. So the stomach has stretch receptors to signal satiety, that's when we're full, by detecting the volume of food eaten, not the weight. So like if you look at our little picture here, if we were to eat 400 calories of oil, you can see it doesn't really fill up the stomach that much. And our brain tells us, hey, you got to eat more. You didn't really eat that much. And again, with the chicken too, there's hardly any fiber in there. So it doesn't really fill up our stomachs too much. And our body tells us to eat more versus 400 calories of vegetables and fruits and things like that. It's really going to fill you up with fiber and signal that you're full. So this is just a random typical day. If you were to have breakfast in the morning and have some oatmeal with your almond milk and raisins and some almonds, and then a snack with the peanut butter and apple, and then have some lentil soup, maybe with some spinach thrown in there and some whole wheat bread. And then dinner, you had some, quinoa and chickpeas and broccoli. Just try to, if you can guess, how much fiber do you think is in this day? So this has almost 68 grams of fiber. So you can see plant-based foods have a lot of fiber, which is great. It's going to really do a lot of beneficial things for us. It's going to, promote those positive gut bacteria to grow, which is what we want. That helps fuel a healthy immune system. It produces that serotonin, those feel-good hormones as well. And then let's talk about protein, because as you well know, if the number one question I get, and by the way, my husband and family and my husband and I have been plant-based vegan for 9 years now. And my children are plant-based vegan as well. But the number one question by far that we get is, where do you get your protein? And thankfully that's not something we really actually have to worry about. Like I talked about before, we don't have to worry about protein. It's fiber most Americans aren't getting enough of. So when in our lives do we require the most, or when in our lives do we grow the most rapidly and require the most protein? So it's when you're a baby, right? When you're an infant. If you think of an infant, I have my 8-month-old, and he has already, he's not even a year old, and he's almost, tripled his weight since he was born. So definitely we need the most protein during infancy and childhood because you're growing a lot. And interestingly enough, breast milk is only 5% protein. A lot of people probably think it's a lot higher than that, right? So we don't need as much protein as a lot of people think we do. And in fact, most Americans get too much protein because they're getting it because what do people think when they think of protein? They immediately think of meat and getting protein from that. So there's 20 amino acids. If you think of amino acids, they're the building blocks that make up our proteins in our body. So 11 of them are actually made by our body, those amino acids, and then the other 9 we have to get from food. And at one time, people thought you had to combine, if you ate plant-based or vegetarian or vegan, they thought you had to combine different foods together to get enough protein, but that's simply not true. Our bodies are smart enough to know, you ate this for breakfast and this for lunch, that's enough protein. You don't have to combine or worry about combining proteins. So the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, this is their recommended protein guide that I go by to tell patients too. So if you take your body weight in pounds and multiply it by 0.36, that will give you about an estimate about how much protein you need every day. And simply, if you're eating enough calories, you're going to get enough protein on a plant-based diet. It's not something people have to worry about. So again, I kind of mentioned that the great protein debate, a lot of people worry about not getting enough, but I always ask people, who do you know that has a protein deficiency? And people usually can't tell me, anyone. So it's not something we have to worry about. Proteins are made up of those amino acid chains, and they do a lot of great things for us. They create enzymes, hormones, they create tissue, of course, muscle tissue, and they work to create transport molecules. So protein is very important. I'm not trying to diminish the importance of protein, but we don't need as much as a lot of people think we do. So again, if we go back to that very basic day, if you were to eat this, how much protein do you think is in this day if someone ate this? I'll give you a second to think about it. So almost 75 grams of protein. So plenty of protein. And I have kind of how much protein is in each thing. So as you can see, like quinoa is high in protein, especially your legumes, your beans and lentils, your chickpeas, those have high protein as well. Even your spinach look at spinach, 1 cup of spinach has 5 grams of protein. It's really not something that you have to be overly concerned about. Even our raisins have a little bit of protein in it, surprisingly. So again, like your carbohydrates, you want to choose the best sources of protein. Of course, people eat a lot on the left, a lot of meat, dairy, eggs, but you want to and you can get protein from those things, of course, but I always say you want to get the most bang for your buck when it comes to protein. Yeah, you can eat that stuff on the left, but you're also going to get packaged with a lot of saturated fats. You're going to get, unfortunately, the animals that are raised nowadays are given a lot of antibiotics. So you are going to be eating antibiotics as well because the animals are fed that. So there's a lot of extra packaged stuff, cholesterol and things that you don't need in your diet versus on the right side there, your beans, lentils, nuts and seeds, things like that. You are going to get packaged with antioxidants and fiber and positive things. So you definitely want to stick on that side of the spectrum. Again, this just tells you this is the protein as shown as a percentage of calories and things. So surprisingly, even spinach, broccoli has protein in it. Again, not something that we have to be overly concerned about. So high intakes of fat, research tells us this, high intakes of fat and protein actually accelerate hormone production that can lead to aging. And excessive levels of like animal-based foods cause our bodies to create something called insulin-like growth factor. And cancer cells love that stuff. It's a fuel for cancer cells to grow. So especially your prostate and breast cancers. And animal products, unfortunately, are deficient in what protects us from cancer. So they don't have the antioxidants, the fibers, the phytonutrients, and phytochemicals that I talked about. I get this question a lot too, but isn't white meat healthy? A lot of people are like, oh, but I just eat chicken. So again, here's what research shows us. They did a study with over 32,000 adults over a 6-year period. And those who avoided red meat but still ate a white meat had actually a 300%, over 300% increase over those who ate no white meat and colon cancer risk. But they found that in that same study that those who ate more beans, peas, lentils, just at least twice a week, so not even that often, were associated with a 50% decrease in risk of cancer. And then another great book is called the China Study. And they, in that study, they found that as animal-based consumption increased from once a week to 4 times a week, breast cancer rates increased by 70%. So thankfully, there's a lot of alternatives to meat nowadays. There are, you guys probably have heard of, it's becoming more and more popular, like Beyond Meat and Impossible Burgers. My take on those is those are fine to eat once in a while. I wouldn't make a routine of eating those every day. They are still processed, but the good news is they and they're high in fat still, so you got to be careful. But they don't contain cholesterol, which is great. And as far as environmental impact, they're so much better for the environment. They take way less water and resources. And they also, of course, are kinder to animals because, of course, it doesn't involve killing an animal to get those products. So they are better for several reasons. I would just not make a habit of eating those every day. The cleaner sources of plant-based protein are going to be your legumes, your beans, lentils. You know, you can get veggie burgers out there that are very good. Nuts, quinoa, tofu, tempeh. If you haven't heard of that, that's made from fermented soybeans. You can get it at like Trader Joe's has it, or most of your grocery stores now. Seitan is a wheat protein. So if you really want something that has a kind of a meaty like texture, seitan can be a very good alternative. So these are two guys that I have met before. Both of them are complete plant-based eaters, and they don't take any steroids or anything like that. They are just, of course, they do a lot of hard work in the gym, but they don't need to eat animal products to get these big, strong muscles, which is great. And Robert Cheek there, the one on the right-hand side, he just, if you're interested, he just released an awesome book called The Plant-Based Athlete. And he's a professional bodybuilder, and him and Matt Frazier wrote this amazing book. You can just get it on Amazon. But if you're into any kind of athletic performance or know of anyone that is, this is a really great book. It's already a New York bestseller. So that's really, really great. So fat. We do need fat in our diet. It has important functions. It's used to absorb our fat soluble vitamins like your vitamins A, D, E, and K. It helps to produce hormones and provide energy. But unfortunately, most Americans eat too much of this. Our body stores fat, unfortunately, very easily. So 100 calories of fat can be stored into 97 calories of body fat. Our body only takes 3 calories to do this process. And Americans, unfortunately, just consume too much fat. And oil, interestingly enough, is one of the most calorie-dense foods on the planet. It's basically pure fat. So again, if you're trying to lose weight, I would try to limit those things. Again, let's try to choose the right type of fats. You want the things on the right-hand side. So getting fat from avocados and nuts and seed is much, much better. And I'll quickly go through this. There's essential fatty acids. You might have heard of omega-3s and omega-6s. Our body actually needs a balance of the two, but most Americans eat way too much of omega-6 fatty acids, which comes from your oils, like your vegetable oils, things that are fried and things like that. But omega-3s, an easy way to get more of those is to eat ground flaxseed. You want to just make sure they're ground because your body won't absorb them if they're not ground up. You'll just poop them back out. So make sure your flax seeds are ground. I always add it to my oatmeal or my overnight oats. You can put it in smoothies. Walnuts are a good source of omega-3. Soybeans actually are as well, and tofu. And you want to aim for 1 to 2 grams a day. So just a quick word on calcium. Calcium, actually, you can get those through your leafy greens, like your bok choy, kale, things like that actually have a lot of calcium, and they're actually better absorbed than cow's milk is for calcium. So as you well know, there's a lot of alternatives to dairy milk. There's so many things out there. If you go to any grocery store, there's lots of great alternatives nowadays. A quick word on cheese. A lot of people tell me they're like, I can easily give up meat, but cheese is what I can't give up. And there's a reason behind that. So think of a baby cow feeding from its mom. There's something in the breast milk of a cow called casomorphines, and it makes the breast milk addictive. So, because if the baby calf didn't have some kind of addictive compound, it wouldn't come back to its mom to feed. So what happens though is when you have dairy milk and it's made into cheese, it becomes addictive. It's like a morphine-like substance that's in that milk, that casomorphine, and it makes people addicted to cheese and to dairy. So if you've had problems with dairy, there's a reason behind it. So thankfully, there's a lot of great plant-based cheeses out there. Again, you have to be aware they're high in fats, not to overdo it, but try them out sometime. They're really great alternatives out there. Again, this just kind of shows that if you take equal 500 calorie portions of plant-based versus animal-based, you're going to get a lot less fat. You're going to get in the plant-based food, you're going to get all those wonderful beta carotene, fiber, vitamin C, whereas you're eating the animal-based foods, you're just losing out on those things. And cancer and whole food plant-based eating. So basically, our plant-based foods have tons of phytonutrients, like your tomato, for example, has 100,000 or 10,000 different phytochemicals in it. And if you're not eating those foods, you're just missing out on those things. And the Journal of National Cancer Institute, they found that men who ate 3 or more servings of cruciferous vegetables, and I'll talk about next what those are, per week had a 41% reduction of prostate cancer. So what are our cruciferous vegetables? Those are like your kale, your cauliflower, your broccoli. Those are the more common ones, bok choy. Try to get as many of these in your diet as you can. Please try to eat these a couple times a week because they're huge at fighting cancer. In fact, the phytonutrients in these vegetables stay in your body for 3 to 5 days after you eat them. So if you can imagine, you eat some broccoli and 3 to 5 days later, you still have those phytonutrients like fighting off cancer cells in your body. Isn't that amazing what food can do? It's really, really awesome. This just talks about diabetes can be reduced on a whole food plant-based diet. Especially if you're diabetic, you want to eat low fat plant-based because unfortunately fat interferes with your insulin receptors. So if we can get more on a plant-based, lower fat diet, it helps diabetes tremendously. Again, trying to go more plant-based is so beneficial. This was Caldwell Esselstyn. He is one of the founders of the Forks Over Knives documentary. And he was, I love this quote. He said, some people think the plant-based whole food diet is extreme. 500,000 people have their chest opened up and a vein taken from their leg and sewn onto their coronary artery. Some people would call that extreme. So this is just showing the left anterior descending. That's called the widowmaker. If you've heard of that, unfortunately, if this clogs off and you have a heart attack, it would kill you. But this is someone that went on a plant-based diet. Look at how much more blood flow on the right side. You can see it completely opened up again. It's amazing what plant-based diet can do. The good news is there's science behind this as well. Some good sites to check out are nutritionfacts.org, pcrm.org, and plant-based research. Just be aware that industry-funded studies, so there's industries like, for example, the dairy or meat industry will do studies, but they will, if they don't like the results of the studies, they just bury the studies and people can't find the information. They'll only produce studies that are in their favor. So just be aware of that. If you hear some kind of study that came out, just look at who funded the study. It really should be not biased. It should be done by a third party that doesn't have any correlation to some kind of industry. So what to eat on a whole food plant-based diet? Vegetables, you want to squeeze in as many vegetables as you can, fruits, beans, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. This just gives you some quick ideas. I'm kind of running out of time here, so I'm going to kind of go fast, but pretty much you can make anything plant-based these days. There's a lot of great options. You can do tacos, fill them with your black beans, corns. You can put avocado in there, mushrooms, tomatoes. Salsa, if you have leftovers, you can make it into like a taco soup. Of course, pasta is a big one in our household, like a whole wheat pasta. You can add lentils or some kind of vegan meat crumbles into the sauce. IKEA makes a plant-based ball too, like a meatball. Just stick with whole grain pasta as much as possible. Make a chili, a plant-based chili. Of course, you can put your lentils in there, or black beans, things like that. Stuffed bell peppers, veggies in a blanket. You can get a whole wheat tortilla and put hummus on it and roll it with different vegetables. This is just a friend. I always get this excuse game of people are like, in their 50s or whatever, and they're like, I'm stuck in my ways. He is now 95 years old. A friend I met through one of my classes. He started eating plant-based vegan when he was 88 years old. He's now 95, doing great. And it's never too late to make a change. And I just wanted to show that. My son was trying to take off his glasses there. But again, you want to plan ahead. If you're going to plan ahead, you're just going to be more successful. So try to prep in the weekends if you can. Like a lot of times I'll make a big thing of like chickpeas or whole grain, like a brown rice or something ahead of time on the weekends. You want to get those healthy snacks ready, because when you're more prepared, you're going to be more successful. When you eat out, don't be afraid to ask questions. Check the menu before you go. And just make sure, a lot of people have a hard time socially. Make sure you explain to your friends that you're trying to improve your health. You can share positive results with them. Bring them a wow dish if you're going to a potluck or something like that, your go-to dishes that are plant-based that'll wow them, and share like a book with them. Let's see. So I'm going to quick show one of our videos so you can kind of see. Let me know if you can't hear the sound, but this is one of the videos my son and I made with a recipe, and I think I sent the recipe on to Lauren or to Brianna, and if I didn't, I can get it sent out so you guys can get the recipe. But I'll show this quick 5-minute video of my son and I here. Our hearts do a lot of amazing things for us. Every day they pump about 2,000 gallons of blood and can be up to 115,000 times, which is amazing. The unfortunate part is in America, heart disease is the #1 killer of both men and women, so it affects them equally, and it's largely preventable, and it's because of I like to call it the SAD diet, the standard American diet. It's composed of about 60% processed foods, about 30% animal products, which are high in cholesterol like meat and dairy and eggs, and then only 10% plant-based. So today I'm going to talk to you about 2 delicious ways to include more plants in your diet. So Ethan and I don't have a ton of time in this video, so we already made this delicious homemade ranch dip that actually uses the power of cashews. You have to taste it to believe it. It's so awesome. We had fun with our veggies. We made a little art here, and we find in our household if we chop up veggies, we're more likely to eat them. So I'll give you guys the recipe of the ranch dip that we made. And now, Ethan, are you going to help me? We're going to make a delicious mousse. Now, don't get scared away. It actually has tofu in it, but tofu in the Nurses' Health Study has been shown to reduce heart disease by 18% with those who included more tofu in their diet. So this is a delicious way to do it. So you're going to do 1 package of the silken tofu. You're going to get this, it's shelf stable. So we already have that in here as well. Then we're going to add 2 tablespoons, excuse me, Ethan, you want to help me, of cacao powder. And we have a 1/4 teaspoon of salt in there, just a little bit of salt. Salt brings out the chocolate flavor. Then we're going to add, we're going to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla. There we go. And cacao, you don't have to tell me twice to eat more chocolate. Cacao has many benefits. It actually helps dilate our blood vessels and reduce blood pressure. So that's great. You want to just make sure your cacao and your chocolate doesn't have a lot of added sugar to it and fats. And then Ethan, help us add this. We have our 1/2 cup of maple syrup. So we're going to add that as our sweetener. Now we're going to go ahead and blend this. everyone. This is their Vitamix, and we've had it for 10 years, and we use it almost every day. You can hear my dogs rustle around here too. They want to get into the action. We use it almost every single day, and we've had it for 10 years. They are fairly pricey, but they're worth it. There we go. And I always say you have to invest your time somewhere. I'd rather have you invest your time in the kitchen rather than the doctor's office. All right, Ethan's gonna drink it. It does, once you refrigerate it, you're gonna refrigerate it after this, it will firm up a little bit. So Ethan, let's dip some of our delicious berries, which are also heart healthy and good for our brain as well. And we have some kiwis in there. You wanna add some of that to yours? I know you love strawberries, so let's add some of that. Cheers. The reason a plant-based diet is so powerful is because it has no cholesterol in it, which is great for heart health. It's full of fiber, which helps fill us up and actually reduces cholesterol levels. And it tends to be lower in sodium also, and high in potassium, which helps our blood pressures be healthier. There's been several peer-reviewed studies that have come out showing the positive benefits of a plant-based diet. Dr. Dean Ornish especially has done those studies showing patients with moderate to severe heart disease had a 90% reduction in chest pain, and their vessels actually opened up on a plant-based diet. So please, I would encourage you to include more plants in your diet and less animal products. And if you'd like to take a free challenge, Google PCRM 21-day Kickstart Challenge, and they'll give you free recipes and free ways to do this. And a lot of great advice from nutrition experts, doctors, dietitians, nurses as well. On a plant-based diet, there's so many delicious things that you can eat. A lot of people think that plant-based eaters only eat lettuce, which is not true. There's so many good things. As you can see, we have chocolate mousse here, delicious berries. But like in the morning, cheers, you can have overnight oats, oatmeal. You can make delicious smoothies. And for lunches and dinners, there's so many things you can do as well. You can make burritos, soups, salads, pizzas, burgers, plant-based burgers. There's so many good things. We definitely don't suffer in our household. We love to eat, and there's delicious foods out there. Peace, love, and plants. All right, let me bring up the screen here. Thank you again for having me. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, I can provide my, if anyone thinks of anything later, you know, sometimes you have one of those questions that you think of later, you can always email me. I would love to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Yes. Wow. I mean, no pun intended, but that was super digestible, which is so hard to sometimes in this space, you can get very overwhelmed. And I want to thank you for making it just very easy for us to head in this right direction. I do see somebody in the chat asking about how much water should be drank in a day.
Generally, the nice thing about plant-based foods is that, especially your fruits and veggies, you just think about them when you cut into them, there's a lot of water. But I still would stay hydrated with water throughout the day. You know, try to drink at least, you know, 8-ounce glasses of water or so a day. 6 to 8 glasses of 8 ounces would be beneficial. But like I said, when you're eating plant-based, just a lot of fruits and veggies and smoothies and stuff, you're getting a lot of water through those things as well.
And then we had another question in our Facebook page this morning about meal prep. Do you have any tips on that front?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's an investment. Like, I would rather have you spend more time in your kitchen rather than your doctor's office, right? It's, you got to invest your time somewhere. I try to do a lot of my meal prep on the weekends. Like, I have something called an Instant Pot. If you guys have heard of those are amazing because you can cook like your grains and your beans in there. You just push a button and walk away and it's done. So I highly recommend like a pressure cooker, like an Instant Pot. Because you can do a lot of prep ahead of time. And I like to make like smoothies, and you can make a couple days worth of smoothies, like 2 to 3 days worth of smoothies ahead of time. So that's really beneficial. And just, you know, cutting up your fruits and veggies, like I said, you're more likely to eat them if they're prepped and ready to go, because you can prep up your veggies for like a stir fry and things like that ahead of time. So you do have to spend some time, but it's worth it. It's worth your health.
Okay, great. And another question in the chat is, can you please state the name again of the website you mentioned that has the information about diabetes?
Oh yeah, it's masteringdiabetes.org.
So that was masteringdiabetes.org.
Yes. Uh-huh. And these are some great resources here on the screen. If you want to do a free challenge like PCRM.org or kickstart.pcrm.org or Challenge 22 will give you guidance how to do it, like 21 to 22 day challenge. On Netflix, definitely check out Game Changers and Forks Over Knives. And these are just this is really good. Whoever asked the meal prep question, Monkey and Me Kitchen Adventures. It's so cute. She has all these meal plans and she puts a whole shopping list. You just click on it. It has a shopping list already made for you. So when you go to the store, you have it already there. So you don't even have to make a shopping list, and it's amazing. So I've tried a couple of her meal plans. It's completely free too. So that's a really, really good resource.
Just snapped a picture of that.
Yeah. Snap a picture of this page, and then all these resources are incredibly helpful.
Yes.
Jennifer,
Uh-huh.
I cannot think of a better presentation on this subject than the one you just gave.
Oh, thank you. I squished a lot of information in there, so I hope I didn't overwhelm all
have
of
you
you.
ever considered putting this information into a book, sending it to Amazon, and letting the world have access to it?
I'll have to add it to my expanding to-do list here, but yeah, maybe.
Jennifer, if someone has asked about sharing a copy of your PowerPoint, is that something that we are able to do with the folks that were on today?
Yeah, and I think this was recorded, right? So people can always watch it again.
That's correct.
So
it takes a little while for our recording. Oh, go ahead, Gary.
I'm sorry. How can we get a copy of your PowerPoint?
If you want it, Gary, I can send it over to you.
I'll
work with you, Jennifer, on that and getting out to the registrants. And there will be ultimately recording. There's, of course, that has to go through a process, but ultimately it will end up on our resources on the health and wellness page on our website.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for giving us all this information today. And I thank all of you that were able to attend. I'm sure we'll have Jennifer back, and I just love the video of you and your son too. So visit YouTube and watch more of those. It's very, very
You can see that regular. How often is that on YouTube?
So if you go to eating4e.com, that goes directly to the YouTube page, and you can watch there's like 30 some videos there that you can watch.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you again, Jennifer.